My top 15 quilting pet peeves. A pet peeve is something that annoys us, and a quilting pet peeve is something that annoys a quilter. Hi, I'm Mary from Joyful and Merry Quilting, and I would like to share with you my top 15 pet peeves. They may be something I've seen someone else do, or something I've done. This quilt behind me will be covered in pet peeve number 7. But either way, each one annoys me in its own special, joyful and merry way. Now I know this is likely to spark some reminders of your own quilting pet peeves, so if you would like to get off your chest something that's a pet peeve for you, please feel free to comment below. Remember, be kind and don't get personal. And remember, I am always trying to be joyful, but I will always be merry. Okay, here goes. Number 1, a messy work area. And I'm telling you, I had a terrible time even making my work area this messy. It drives me crazy. I hate when my work area gets cluttered, and I hate when someone's demonstrating something with a cluttered work area, just because I keep looking at the mess and I can't look at what they're doing. A clean work area is a safe work area, right? So let's clean this area up before we get to number 2. My number 2 pet peeve, cutting paper with fabric scissors. I think every quilter has trouble with this. Does it really make a difference? So we raise such a fuss about it when someone picks up our fabric scissors to cut paper with it, or whatever they're going to cut with it. Yes and no. If you just cut a piece of paper once in a while, it's probably not going to instantly dull your scissors. But if you do it routinely and you have your fabric scissors in the same place where your paper scissors are and you use them interchangeably, eventually your fabric scissors are going to get dull. So you don't want to do that. If you're cutting paper, use some scissors. I have mine marked paper, so I know these are okay for paper. Use those scissors when I'm cutting my paper. Use my fabric scissors, and everyone knows Gingher scissors are fabric scissors. Use the expensive fabric scissors just for fabric. It really does give you a lot better cut if you are using them only for fabric and not for paper. Number 3 on my list of pet peeves is calling a quilt a blanket. Doesn't that just feel like nails on a chalkboard whenever you hear someone refer to a quilt as a blanket? Is there really a difference between the two? Is a quilt a blanket maybe? No, it's not. A blanket is a single layer. A quilt is multiple layers, usually a front, batting, and backing. That's the difference. The fact that the quilt has 3 different layers actually helps you to retain heat when you have a quilt draped over you. If you don't want something quite as heavy, then you would put a single layer, which is also called a blanket. There is a difference. A quilt is not a blanket simply because of the 3 layers that make up a quilt. My number 4 pet peeve is misspelling the word border. This is a border. When you're referring to the frame around a quilt, it is called a border. B-O-R-D-E-R. Now, a boarder, B-O-A-R-D-E-R, is someone who is renting the apartment over your garage. That's a boarder. This is a B-O-R-D-E-R, border. My number 5 pet peeve is crooked plaids. How often have you tried to square up a quilt block that's made with pieces that are either a plaid or a gingham and it's not printed on the straight of grain? It's totally impossible. Even when you cut right on the lines, on the plaid lines, your strip often leans either to the left or it leans to the right, and it can't be added to those other pieces. Now here's a couple of examples I have here. First of all, this is a gingham that is a good quality Riley Blake Designs fabric by Lori Holt, and it is perfect. It is on the straight of grain, easy to cut, and it is absolutely beautiful. Now, this is one thing that I often struggle with when someone says fabric is fabric, it doesn't matter where you buy it. Well, sometimes it does matter. Some more expensive fabrics take a little extra care to make sure that everything lines up right. Now, in comparison, here is a gingham print that was actually a layer cake that I bought, and you can see from this it is so crooked. It is not cut at all on the straight of grain. Does it matter? For some projects it probably doesn't matter, and it's okay, who cares? But for other projects where you want everything to look straight and not skewed, this will not work. Even if you trim it back so that you have cut it on the lines, you still have to stretch and tug and pull and try to get that back on the straight of grain. Sometimes it works, but sometimes it doesn't. It really is a pet peeve of mine if I have to do that work that should have been done by the manufacturer. Pet peeve number 6. Do you know how it is when you have sewn together strip after strip after strip after strip, and then when you go to press it, you realize you sewed the wrong side together. You sewed the right side to the wrong side instead of right sides together, and you have to rip it out. Okay, that's half of the pet peeve. The other half is you go to reach for your seam ripper and you've got it point up in your cup, and you grab it and ouch, it is there and it stabs you. This is so important. It's such a safety issue. We really need to remember to either close our seam ripper or turn it upside down so that we don't have that issue. Sometimes we forget. We get in a hurry, we get busy, and we don't. That is a huge pet peeve of mine. If I go to reach for my seam ripper and it's open, and also if I've sewn my seams together incorrectly and I've got the wrong sides together and have to rip all of those out. Take a look at my seam ripping video if you need to rip out long strips. I've got a great tip on that one as well. Number 7. This one gets double billing. There are 2 quotes that really are a pet peeve of mine. The first one is, finished is better than perfect. And the second one is, it'll quilt out. Well, it really depends. If it looks like this, it won't quilt out. And I really feel like this finished quilt probably isn't better than even less than perfect. It's easier to piece accurately rather than hope those inaccuracies will disappear once the quilt is quilted. Chances are good that those waves and ripples will remain even with some good dense quilting. And if we put something together and we are sloppy or careless, to me that is not better than perfect. If we've worked really hard and we have tried our best, then yes, finishing it is better than perfect. I want to tell you about this quilt behind me. This is the first quilt I ever made. Is it perfect? Not even close. But am I glad I finished it? Absolutely. I'll never forget the experience, and it's what got me started quilting. So that part is really good. But if I just throw something together and I know the rules and I don't follow them just because I want it to be finished, then I don't think finished is better than perfect, and it's not going to quilt out. Pet peeve number 8, rotary cutter carelessness. That is a huge pet peeve of mine. So tell me, what is wrong with this picture right now? I was actually watching a video not too long ago where someone was talking about how to square up fabric. And she had a Fiskars rotary cutter similar to this one that she kept swinging around on her finger back and forth as she was talking. I don't know if it was just nervousness or what. But the cutter was open. And as she's swinging around on her finger, I couldn't even listen to anything about squaring up fabric. I was worried that cutter was going to fly off her finger and stab her cat that was laying on the cutting table. It was crazy. That was a major issue for me. And as I look at this cup with my rotary cutter in it, the blade is open. That's what's wrong with this. If you look at this, rotary cutters need to be closed every time we are not using it. When it's sitting on our table, when it's sitting in our mug, it needs to be closed because it's very dangerous. And I'm telling you, there are more times than not that I'll watch my videos after I've recorded something, and in part of the video I have left my rotary cutter open. I just forgot. We have to remember to close it each and every time. That is a huge pet peeve of mine, of myself, and when I'm watching someone else. Close the rotary cutter. Which leads me to my number 9 pet peeve, pets in our sewing area. Now, I love my dog, I love my cat. I am very careful, however, when I'm sewing or cutting to make sure that they are not in danger in my sewing room. Pins, cutters, whatever. I don't want my cat or my dog around it. For those of you who have pets, you know what this is like. I can't lay a quilt on the floor or on a couch without my dog or my cat wanting to lay on it. They love quilts. But if you're a pet lover and you care about your pet and there are pins or you're cutting or there are needles close by, or if my quilt is being gifted to someone, whether or not they have allergies, that doesn't matter. My pets are not allowed in the area where it's being constructed, and they are not allowed on the quilt. My number 10 pet peeve is sewing over pins. Believe it or not, I had a quilt instructor who told me that it was okay to sew over pins. They were little, they were skinny, and my stitches were wide enough that I could sew right over the top of those pins. Not okay, not true. After sewing over this pin and picking it out of my sewing machine, I am much more careful to remove the pins first. I didn't even know if my machine was permanently damaged after sewing over this pin. The needle hit right at that spot where the bend is and drove it right down into my sewing machine. That's why I don't sew over pins ever. My number 11 pet peeve in quilting is wrinkled fabrics. It is impossible for me to accurately cut fabric without ironing it first and pressing it with a pressing solution. I watched a YouTuber demonstrate cutting a large piece of fabric. She had it on a huge cutting table and she was getting ready to show us how to create bias binding. So she had this piece of fabric, but it hadn't been ironed. And she apologized for the wrinkles, but she didn't iron it. And she was wrestling with this big piece of fabric and she was pushing it around and she was trying to move it where it needed to go. And I could see there was no way that that piece was going to come out straight when she finished with what she was doing with it. And it wasn't. We need to press first, and then once we have pressed, we cut later. We have to have a smooth surface when it comes to our fabric before we cut the fabric. It's not going to line up otherwise, and it really is a pet peeve of mine when I have a piece of wrinkled fabric and I'm trying to cut it. It's just easier to go ahead and press it first, then cut. My number 12 quilting pet peeve is using your rotary cutter and sawing the fabric. In other words, back and forth, trying to cut the piece. When we use a rotary cutter, we take one swipe away from ourselves. We don't cut back toward ourselves. We don't cut this direction. We take one swipe. If it doesn't cut the fabric, we need a new blade. That's all there is to it. So if you are finding that you're placing your ruler on your fabric and then you are cutting more than one swipe because you haven't cut through, you can see, well, it didn't cut at all. And trying again and it didn't cut. So then you start going this direction and then you start doing this. That is when accidents happen. If your cutter is not working, just change the blade. My number 13 quilting pet peeve is eating and drinking while quilting. Have you ever been at a quilt retreat or sitting in a class and somebody's either got a cup of coffee or a can of pop and they're sitting there drinking, they're eating, and all of a sudden they knock it over? You're usually in pretty close quarters when you're at a retreat or you're in a class, but even at home, if you have your can of pop or your cup of coffee sitting too close to where you're working, maybe it's too close to your sewing machine, too close to your ironing board, or too close to your cutting area and you spill it, what a mess. It can cause lots of problems with the project you're working on. And if you are somewhere at a quilt retreat or in a class and you spill your drink on someone else's work, it's not going to be a pretty sight. It's not that I'm against eating and drinking while I'm quilting, because I do it all the time. We just want a safe place for those drinks and for that food so that we don't get crumbs and we don't get liquid spilled. I've got this great product here that clips onto my table and my pop can just fits right in here. It's perfect. There are a lot of things out there like that that we can use that will keep this from happening. So make sure that you have a safe place for your drink. You'll have a clean work area and everything on the table will be safe. My number 14 quilting pet peeve is pre-cuts that aren't cut accurately. I bought these. They were supposed to be 1.5-inch strips. My friend and I spent hours trimming these strips to 1.5. This is what we had left over. All this came off of the excess because this was not cut accurately. The time we supposedly saved by buying a pre-cut was spent trimming these to 1.5 inches, which was really not fun. In addition, that pre-cut 10-inch square that I talked about earlier, where we talked about the straight of grain not being lined up properly when it came to a plaid, well, this has more than one issue. The other issue, if you look at the way this is, it doesn't measure 10 inches. I have the 10-inch mark lined up here. Now it's crooked. It's been cut crooked. You can tell that was the issue we had originally. But I have this lined up here, and I tried to line it up as best as I can here. We are at least 1/8 of an inch off on this side, and we go from pretty much even all the way down here to almost 1/4 of an inch off. That is a huge pet peeve. When I buy a 10-inch square, a layer cake, or whatever they're calling it, I want it to measure 10 inches. I don't want it to measure less. More I can trim back. I don't like to, but I can. I can't do anything with less. This is a huge pet peeve of mine. Before I give you my number 15 quilting pet peeve, I got a bonus for you that I know everybody is going to agree with me on. Running out of bobbin thread. Don't you just hate that? You're almost to the end. You're playing bobbin chicken. You think, I really think I have enough thread left on that bobbin to make it to the end of my seam, and you get about this far and you don't have enough and you've run out. Or you've sewn strip after strip after strip, not realizing it's an empty bobbin. And then when you go to pull it apart, your strips are not sewn together. That is a huge pet peeve of mine, totally self-inflicted, but I still don't like it. My number 15 absolute worst pet peeve is when the power goes out. This has to be the biggest pet peeve that I have. Our power goes out way too often, and it drives me crazy. I might be hosting YouTube Live, maybe I'm working on a project, maybe I'm taping a video, and right in the middle of what I'm doing,